The house felt bigger after she died. Too big. Not in square footage. In silence. Every room carried an echo that didn't belong to the present. Her voice used to live in those walls, soft, steady, always just out of reach when I tried to remember it clearly. After the funeral, people said the usual things. Time heals. You'll adjust. They didn't know that time doesn't heal. It just stretches the distance between you and what you lost until it starts to feel unreal. I didn't adjust. I endured. That's what I've always done. You don't run a construction business for 40 years by falling apart. You wake up, you show up, you carry the weight. Even when your hands ache. Even when your chest feels hollow. Especially then. The jobs kept coming. Small builds. Repairs. Contracts that didn't care whether your wife was alive or buried. Wood still needed cutting. Concrete still needed pouring. Life doesn't pause because yours did. So I worked. And when I wasn't working, I stayed out of the rooms that reminded me too much of her. Until the day I didn't. It started with a box. Nothing special. Just one of the last things I hadn't sorted through. It sat in the back of the closet like a sealed-off part of my life I wasn't ready to reopen. But something about that day felt off. Quiet in the wrong way. I pulled it out. Set it on the bed. Stood there longer than I should have before opening it. Inside, pieces of her. Old receipts. Jewelry she never wore but couldn't throw away. Photos I turned face down almost immediately. And then, the phone. Her old phone. I remembered when she stopped using it. Said it was outdated. Got a new one. This one ended up forgotten like everything else people replace when they think they have time. Should have been dead. It had been dead for over a year. I picked it up anyway. Turned it in my hand. There's something unsettling about holding an object that outlives the person who used it. Like it knows something you don't. I almost put it back. Then it buzzed. Once. Sharp. Mechanical. Impossible. I froze. The screen lit up. No charger. No warning. Just light cutting through the dim room like a blade. And there it was. A message. No timestamp. No contact name. No history. Just words. Go to the cabin. Don't bring anyone but the kids. I read it once. Twice. 10 times. It didn't change. Neither did the feeling crawling up my spine. I checked the battery. 0. Dead. And yet it had spoken. I didn't tell anyone. What was I supposed to say? That my dead wife had reached out from a dead device? That something unfinished had found its way back to me? No. Men like me don't share things we can't explain. We act. The cabin wasn't random. It was hers. Before me. Before our life together. A place she kept at a distance even after all those years. We went there sometimes, but never often enough for me to understand it. There were always parts of her that stayed locked. I thought that was normal. Now I wasn't so sure. I called Emma the next morning. She came over like she always did. Fast. Distracted. Already mid-conversation before she crossed the doorway. Dad, you have to see this venue I found. It's insane. Like actually insane. She barely looked at me, just dropped her bag, pulled out her phone, and started scrolling through pictures of something expensive enough to require justification. I watched her. Not the way a father admires his daughter. The way a man studies something he doesn't fully recognize anymore. She had her mother's eyes, but not her softness. That had faded somewhere along the way. Sit, I said. She did. Reluctantly. Still scrolling. I'm gonna need your help, she added. Almost casually. There it was. Not can you help. Not would you consider it. Need. I leaned back in my chair. What kind of help? She didn't hesitate long. Financial. Of course. I nodded once. How much? She told me. The number didn't shock me. What shocked me was how easily she said it. Like she'd already decided it was mine to give. I didn't answer right away. She filled the silence quickly. It's a wedding, Dad. It's supposed to be big. You only do this once. Once. I thought about that. About everything you only do once. And how easily people spend what isn't theirs to spend. I'm going to the cabin, I said. That got her attention. A flicker. Brief. Why? I just am. She sighed. Dad, I don't really have time for random trips right now. Of course she didn't. But when I added, we can talk about the wedding on the way, everything changed. She nodded. Just like that. The drive was long. Too long for the kind of conversation we had. She talked numbers, venues, dress fittings, guest lists that kept expanding every time she said them out loud. Every sentence circled back to money. Every pause led to another request dressed as a necessity. I drove, listened, said very little. At one point, she smiled at me like we were on the same side of something. You've done well, Dad. You can afford it. Not thank you. Not I appreciate you. Just a calculation. I tightened my grip on the wheel. The road ahead felt narrower. By the time we reached the cabin, the light was fading. It stood there exactly as I remembered. And yet a knot. Too still. Too untouched. Like time had avoided it on purpose. Emma stepped out, looked around, and frowned. I don't like this place. I didn't answer, because I was already thinking about the message. Don't bring anyone but the kids. Kids. Plural. I had only brought her. And for the first time since that phone lit up, I felt like I had misunderstood something important. Inside, the air was thick, closed, waiting. Emma didn't explore, didn't ask questions. She sat down almost immediately, phone back in her hand. Dad, we need to finalize things this week. Prices are already going up. Of course. Always forward. Always more. Never looking back. I walked deeper into the cabin. Something pulled me. Not a sound. Not a movement. A certainty. And then I saw it. A door. Wrong. Out of place. Half hidden behind a shelf that didn't belong where it stood. I stopped. Stared. Emma's voice echoed from behind me. I'm serious. I might need more than we talked about. More. Always more. I stepped closer to the door. Ran my hand along its edge. Cold. Solid. Real. Like it had always been there. Just not for me. Until now. That's when it settled in. Not all at once. Piece by piece. Quiet. Final. I wasn't here because of curiosity. I was here because something had been waiting. And behind me, my daughter kept talking like none of it mattered. Like I was just a man she needed something from. Not someone she belonged to. I reached for the handle. And in that moment I knew, whatever was behind that door would change everything. I opened the door. Slow. Careful. Like the wood itself might react if I moved too fast. The hinges didn't creak. That was the first thing that felt wrong. A door that old should have complained. Should have resisted. But it moved easily, like it had been used recently. Or like it had been waiting. The air behind it was colder. Not just temperature. Something deeper. The kind of cold that doesn't belong to weather. I stepped inside. One step. Then another. The room wasn't large. Bare walls. No windows. A single overhead light that flickered once before settling into a dull, steady glow. It wasn't a storage space. It wasn't unfinished. It was deliberate. Built to be hidden. Built to be found. But only by someone who knew where to look. And I hadn't known. Not until now. There was a desk. Old. Solid. The kind of wood that doesn't warp with time. On it papers. Organized. Too organized. Stacks tied with string. Envelopes labeled in handwriting I recognized immediately. My wife's. My chest tightened. I didn't touch anything at first. Just stood there, taking it in. Because something inside me already understood. This wasn't just a forgotten corner of a cabin. This was a secret. And secrets don't sit quietly for no reason. Dad! Emma's voice drifted in from the other room. Sharp. Annoyed. Are you even listening to me? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Not yet. I moved closer to the desk. Picked up the first envelope. My name wasn't on it. Neither was hers. Just a date. Years ago. I opened it. Inside documents. Financial. Detailed. Careful. Too careful. Accounts I didn't recognize. Transfers that didn't match anything from our life together. Names I had never heard before. And then, a name I had. Her maiden name. But not used the way it should have been. Not as a past. as something active, ongoing, hidden. My hand tightened around the paper. I flipped through more accounts, more transfers, different cities, different signatures, same handwriting, same precision. She hadn't just kept secrets. She had lived another life. Dad! Emma's voice was closer now, impatient. I heard her footsteps moving toward me. I set the papers down, but not carefully this time. Faster. Like I'd touched something I shouldn't have. She appeared in the doorway, arms crossed, irritation written across her face. What are you doing in here? I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, I saw her mother, not in her features, in her distance, in the way she stood like I was interrupting something, instead of discovering something. You ever been in here? I asked. She frowned. No. Why would I? I held her gaze, longer than she liked. She shifted slightly, uncomfortable, but not curious. That's what stayed with me. Not once did she ask what I found. Not once did she step closer. Her eyes drifted past me, then back to her phone. We don't have time for this, Dad. Can we go over the budget again? Budget. That word hit differently now. I turned back to the desk, picked up another document. This one thicker, folder. Inside letters. Handwritten. Some opened. Some sealed. All hers. I opened one at random. The ink had faded slightly, but the words were clear. Not addressed to me. Not meant for me. If you're reading this, it means I was right to prepare for it. I stopped. Read it again. Slow. Men like him don't change. They only find new ways to take. My throat tightened. Him. Not me. Someone else. Behind me, Emma sighed loudly. Dad, seriously. This is getting ridiculous. Ridiculous. I folded the letter carefully, placed it back, then turned to her. You said your fiancé handles investments, right? She blinked. Thrown off. Yeah, why? How long have you known him? 2 years. And you trust him? Her expression hardened slightly. Of course I do. Why are you asking that? I studied her face. Looked for hesitation. Doubt. Anything. I didn't find it. Just annoyance. And something else. Expectation. Like she was waiting for me to get back to what mattered. Money. I nodded once. Nothing. I stepped past her. Out of the room. She followed immediately. Okay. Can we please focus? I need to lock things in this week. Need. Again. Always need. Never pause. Never question. That night, the cabin didn't feel like a place. Felt like a warning. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those documents. Those names. That handwriting. And that message. Don't bring anyone but the kids. Kids. Plural. Why? Why that condition? Why now? Emma slept fine. Of course she did. She had nothing to question. Nothing to doubt. Her world still made sense. Mine didn't. In the morning, I went back into the room. Alone. This time, I didn't hesitate. I went through everything. Systematically. Like I would on a job site when something didn't line up. Check the structure. Check the load. Find the flaw. The pattern emerged slowly. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. Money. Large amounts. Moved carefully. Hidden behind names that weren't hers. Men's names. Different ones. But always connected to her. And always ending the same way. Empty accounts. Disappearing trails. She hadn't been a victim. She had been ahead of something. Tracking it. Anticipating it. Maybe even escaping it. And then I found the last folder. Different from the rest. No dates. No labels. Just one word written across the front. Emma. My hand stopped. Right there. Midair. I didn't open it immediately. Didn't want to. Because some part of me already knew. Whatever was inside that folder wouldn't just explain my wife. It would explain my daughter. I heard Emma outside. On the phone. Laughing. Light. Carefree. Talking about centerpieces. Venues. And money. Always money. I opened the folder. Slow. Inside documents. Recent. Too recent. And photos. I picked one up. Emma. Smiling. standing next to a man I had only met twice, her fiancé. But the photo wasn't from anything she had shown me. It wasn't posed. It wasn't public. It was observed, like someone had been watching. Underneath it, papers. Financial again. But this time, the names were familiar. His name. Repeated. Debts. Large ones. Growing. Desperate patterns. My chest went tight. Not from confusion. From clarity. Slow. Cold. Unavoidable. Behind me, Emma stepped inside. You ready? We should head back soon. I didn't turn around. Didn't answer. Because in that moment, I understood something I couldn't undo. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't paranoia. This was a pattern. One my wife had seen before. One she had prepared for. And one my daughter was walking straight into. Or worse, already part of. I placed the photo back into the folder. Carefully. Too carefully. Because my hands weren't steady anymore. Yeah, I said finally. My voice sounded different. Even to me. Let's go home. She smiled. Relieved. Like we were finally getting back to what mattered. The wedding. The money. The plan. I picked up the folder. Didn't let her see. Didn't say a word. Because something had already shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just enough. The kind of shift that happens before a structure collapses. When the foundation gives way. Quietly. Irreversibly. And as we drove away from the cabin, I made a decision. I didn't say it out loud. Didn't even fully form it in words. But it was there. Solid. Final. I wasn't going to fund something I didn't understand. I wasn't going to pay for a lie. And for the first time since my wife died, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing. I drove us back from the cabin in silence. Emma filled that silence the way she always did now. Not with warmth, not with memory, not with anything a daughter says when she feels her father slipping away. She filled it with invoices disguised as dreams. Flowers, lighting, imported wine, a dress alteration that somehow cost more than the first truck I ever bought for the business. She talked about elegance the way desperate people talk about oxygen. Like without it she would suffocate in front of other people's eyes. I kept both hands on the wheel and let her speak. That was the difference between youth and age. When you're young, you think words reveal the truth. When you get older, you learn that repetition does. Whatever a person circles back to, whatever they keep polishing, defending, feeding, that's what owns them. Money owned her now. Maybe it had for longer than I wanted to admit. Halfway home, she turned in the passenger seat and lowered her voice, almost tender, like she was doing me a kindness by softening the blow. So I was thinking, she said, the original amount might not be enough. I didn't look at her. Might not. She gave a nervous laugh. Dad, come on. You know weddings snowball. Once you start doing things properly, everything adds up. Properly. That word sat in the truck cab like a bad smell. And how much more? I asked. She named another number. Bigger than the first. My jaw tightened, but I kept my eyes on the road. Seattle traffic moved around us in dull streams of gray and brake lights. Rain had started thin at first, then steady, needling against the windshield. You already committed, she added. I turned to look at her then. Committed to what? She blinked, surprised that I'd made her say it out loud. To helping, she said. To making sure it happens. There was no gratitude in her face. No uncertainty. Just pressure. Just expectation. It was the look subcontractors get right before they try to hand you a change order they hid until the last minute. They don't ask because they respect you. They ask because they think you're trapped. I faced the road again. I said I'd think. I told her. Her mouth hardened. You know, Mom would have wanted this. That one landed. Not because it was true. Because it was useful. She used her dead mother like a key, sliding it into the lock she thought would always open me. For a moment I said nothing. The wipers dragged back and forth across the glass, each pass sounding like restraint. Then I said, very quietly, "Don't do that again." She folded her arms and stared out the window. The rest of the drive passed in cold silence. When I dropped her off, she didn't hug me. She didn't even look back when she closed the door. She just said, "I need an answer by Friday," and walked inside as if she had sent a reminder to an employee. I sat in the driveway for another minute, engine idling, rain trembling on the hood, and felt something old inside me finally give way. Not grief. Grief is soft compared to what comes after disappointment hardens. This was recognition. Back home, I locked the doors, carried the folder from the cabin into my office, and spread everything out across the desk the way I would lay out blueprints before a difficult build. Neatly, methodically, no room for emotion, no room for denial. But emotion was there anyway, in the tremor of my fingers, in the ache behind my eyes, in the anger that rose every time I saw Emma's fiancé's name. Nathan Cole. That was the man she had brought into my house with polished shoes, good posture, and the kind of smile that tries to get ahead of suspicion. He had called me sir too quickly, complimented the craftsmanship on my staircase, asked a few careful questions about the business, about growth, about whether I was scaling or maintaining. At the time, I'd taken him for a young man eager to impress an older one. Now I saw it differently. He hadn't been admiring. He had been measuring. I started with the papers from the hidden room. Most of them were fragments, partial account statements, copies of legal filings, notes in my wife's handwriting, names linked by arrows and dates. Alone, each page looked thin. Together, they formed the outline of a trap. Not one trap, pattern of them. Men carrying debt. Men presenting themselves as solvent, confident, upward moving. Men courting access before affection had time to prove itself. Men who didn't need love nearly as much as they needed a bridge to money they couldn't reach on their own. On one page, my wife had written a sentence so hard she had nearly carved through the paper. They always create urgency first. If you feel rushed, stop. I sat back in my chair and closed my eyes. Urgency. Emma needed an answer by Friday. I called my bank first thing the next morning. Not to cancel anything publicly. Not yet. I wasn't ready for noise. I wanted silence, control, time. I told them I wanted alerts on every major transaction, dual authorization on anything over a certain amount, and a temporary hold on any newly initiated large transfers tied to my personal accounts or business reserves. The woman on the line was polite, efficient, and just cautious enough not to ask why an old contractor suddenly wanted to build a financial moat overnight. Then I called the attorney I'd used years earlier when a supplier tried to bury me in a bad contract. Martin Hayes. Older now. Sharper too. He remembered me immediately. "Jack," he said. "You only call when something matters." "It matters," I told him. We met that afternoon. I brought the folder. Not all of it, only the pieces I trusted myself to explain. He sat across from me in his office, reading in silence, occasionally sliding one document aside and pulling another closer. Finally, he looked up. "Where did you get this?" "My wife left it." He held my gaze. "Left it or hid it?" I thought about that. "Both." He nodded once, as if that answer fit too many things he'd seen before. When I told him about Nathan, about the wedding, about the pressure for money, Martin's expression changed by degrees. Not surprised, not dramatic, just increasingly certain. "You need distance between your assets and whatever this becomes," he said. "Immediately. Freeze discretionary commitments. Review any contracts in your name. If anyone's been representing your financial position in ways you didn't approve, document it. Quietly." "Do you think she knows?" I asked. He didn't answer right away. "I think," he said at last, "that people often know enough to be dangerous before they know enough to be ashamed." That sentence stayed with me. Over the next 3 days, I did what I've always done when something threatens what I built. I inspected. I called in favors from men who owed me honest answers. A retired bondsman I once helped with a remodel. An accountant who had spent 20 years untangling ugly books. A supplier whose brother worked collections and knew the smell of buried debt better than most priests know sin. I gave them Nathan's name. By Thursday, the picture began to sharpen. No successful business. No stable holdings. No polished little empire waiting to welcome my daughter into prosperity. What he had instead was debt. Layers of it. personal loans, private lenders, civil claims. One dissolved company that had died with unpaid obligations clinging to it like barnacles to a rotten hull. There were whispers too, never enough for headlines, always enough to make decent people step back. He borrowed with charm, delayed with confidence, reappeared under cleaner stories. And Emma? That part was worse. Because it wasn't ignorance. Not clean ignorance. A friend of a friend sent me screenshots from social media posts and event pages. Emma posing in places that weren't hers, captioning them like they were part of her everyday life. Mentions of family investments. Casual references to my father's development holdings. She had built an image of me that didn't match reality, not because I was poor, but because the version she sold was easier to leverage. Bigger, more liquid, more available for extraction. I read every line twice, each one cut deeper than the last. I had spent my life earning respect the slow way, hour by hour, contract by contract, with rain in my boots and sawdust in my lungs. And my daughter had turned that life into stage dressing for a lie. By evening, Martin called. "You need to see one more thing," he said. At his office, he handed me a printed file. Inside was a draft proposal. Not signed, not formal, but real enough. It outlined family-backed liquidity support, to be used after the wedding for consolidation of outstanding liabilities. Nathan's language, not quite criminal, not quite clean. And there, buried in the assumptions section, was the phrase that made my stomach turn. Bride's father expected to provide immediate capital bridge. Expected. Not asked. Expected. I looked up at Martin. He said nothing. He didn't have to. The wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was timing, theater, cover. A beautiful ceremony wrapped around a cash extraction. And Emma had known enough to stand inside it without flinching. Maybe she didn't know every number. Maybe she hadn't seen every debt. But she knew the shape of it. Knew enough to exaggerate me. Knew enough to apply pressure. Knew enough to keep saying more, more, more. My wife had seen something like this once. Maybe in those older files. Maybe in her own blood before I ever met her. And from whatever guilt or fear she carried, she had left a trail for me to follow. Too late to save her. Maybe not too late to stop it from swallowing our daughter whole. Or maybe it was already too late for that, and all I could do was stop them from feeding on me. I drove home in the dark with the city sliding past in smeared lights and shadow. By then my decision had hardened into something stronger than pain. I would not fund the illusion. I would not be used to decorate their fraud with parental blessing. And I would not confront Emma in private, where tears could blur facts and love could be weaponized into surrender. No, if they wanted a performance, I would give them one. But mine would end differently. Mine would end with the lights on, the lies named, and every smiling guest forced to see the bones underneath the perfect wedding they came to admire. That night Emma called twice. I let it ring. Then she texted. "Need confirmation tonight. Vendors are waiting. Please don't do this to me." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I set the phone face down on the table and left it there in the dark. Because for the first time in her life, I was not going to save her from the consequences moving toward her. I was going to meet them head-on. And when I did, somebody was going to learn that a father is not an endless source of rescue. Sometimes he is the last wall standing between his child and a lie she chose to love. I can continue the next part, but I can't reliably guarantee an exact 8,000 character count inside chat without a counting tool. I can keep it very close and preserve the flow. #####4. The illusion breaks / the wedding collapses ****. The rehearsal dinner was held in a private room on the top floor of a waterfront restaurant, the kind of place designed to make ordinary people feel richer than they are for a few hours. Soft lights, white linen, glass everywhere. Seattle at night glowing beyond the windows like a promise nobody had earned. I arrived 10 minutes late on purpose. Not late enough to cause a scene at the door. Late enough that everyone was already seated, already drinking, already deep inside the performance. Emma saw me first. Her face changed in stages. Relief, tension, then calculation. She stood too quickly, smoothing her dress with both hands. "Dad, You came. Not asterisk I'm glad you're here. Asterisk. Not asterisk thank you. Asterisk. Just surprised that the piece she was counting on had arrived after all. Nathan rose beside her with that polished expression I had come to hate. He crossed the room with his hand out, smile fixed, voice warm in exactly the way empty men practice in mirrors. Jack, good to see you. I looked at his hand and then at him. He lowered it slowly. Good. Let him feel the room shift. Around us sat their little audience, bridesmaids glowing with second-hand importance, a few of Nathan's friends in expensive jackets they probably still owed money on, older relatives smiling the tired smiles people wear when they want family events to stay simple and photogenic. Emma touched my arm. Lightly, carefully. Can we not do anything weird tonight? I turned to her. Anything weird? That was what truth becomes when lies have been rehearsed long enough. I'm here to listen, I said. She searched my face for softness and didn't find it. We took our seats. I sat near the end of the table, far enough from the center to be ignored if I wanted, close enough to end everything when the time came. And for the first 20 minutes, I listened. Nathan told stories about expansion plans, about upcoming opportunities, about a business contact in Portland and a possible acquisition nobody could verify. He spoke in the language of men who want to sound successful to people who confuse tone with substance. Every sentence was smooth, vague in all the right places, full of motion, empty of detail. The table loved him for it. That's the thing about fraud when it dresses well. It doesn't need evidence. It just needs atmosphere. Emma laughed at his jokes a second too quickly, reached for his hand at moments that felt staged. Every gesture between them seemed designed for witnesses. And all the while I kept seeing the phrase from Martin's file. Bride's father expected to provide immediate capital bridge. Expected. The word sat in my chest like a nail. Then came the toasts. Emma's maid of honor cried first. Nathan's best man followed, talking about ambition and love as if he had mistaken one for the other. Then someone near the middle of the table said, smiling, Jack, you should say something. The room turned. Emma's face went pale. Nathan leaned back in his chair, but I caught the flicker in his eyes. Not fear yet, just alertness. He thought he could manage me. That was his mistake. I stood slowly, napkin falling from my lap to the floor. My knees hurt. My back ached. I was 68 years old and tired in ways those people at that table couldn't begin to understand. Tired from years of working in cold rain. Tired from carrying a business through lean winters. Tired from burying a wife and trying not to drown in the silence afterward. But that night, the tiredness sharpened me. It made me honest. I lifted my glass. No smile. No performance. I've spent my life building things, I said. Homes. Additions. Foundations. Things that hold because they're honest about their weight. The room quieted. Nathan watched me carefully now. I set the glass down untouched. And I've learned something from that work. If you build on rot, it doesn't matter how beautiful it looks from the street. Sooner or later, it caves in. Emma whispered, Dad. I ignored her. Nathan, I said, turning toward him. You've spent a lot of time talking about success, investments, growth, plans. You've let my daughter and everyone in this room believe you're a man building a future. He gave a strained smile. Jack, maybe this isn't. No, I said. This is exactly the time. The room had gone still enough to hear cutlery settle against plates. I reached inside my jacket and took out the folded papers. Not all of them, just enough. Civil claims, debt summaries, dissolved business filings, the proposal draft, the bones. I placed them on the table in front of him. I had a lawyer look into you, I said. Turns out there is no successful businessman here. There is a man in debt up to his throat. Personal loans, failed companies, collection activity, liabilities dressed up as ambition. His face changed then. Not red, not angry, gray. A man's real face always appears when the room stops believing him. Emma stood abruptly. Stop. Stop it right now. I looked at her. No. I should have stopped a long time ago. Nathan reached for the papers. I put my hand on them first. And this, I said, lifting the last page, is the part one find most interesting. A capital bridge. Family-backed liquidity support. Money expected after the wedding to stabilize outstanding obligations. Someone at the far end of the table muttered, "What the hell?" I kept going. Let me translate that into plain English. This wedding wasn't just a wedding. It was cover. A beautiful event wrapped around a financial rescue plan. Mine. Emma's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Nathan tried anyway. That's not what this is. You're misreading. I'm not misreading anything, I said. And I'm too old to be charmed by vocabulary. Debt is debt. A scheme is a scheme. And dressing it up in flowers doesn't change the math. His best man stared at him now, not speaking. Two women near the window exchanged a look so fast they probably hoped nobody caught it. They were wrong. Everybody caught it. That is the cruelty of exposure. Once truth enters a room, even the people who don't understand all of it understand enough. Emma's voice finally came back, raw and shaking. You had no right. I laughed once. A short, joyless sound. No right? Emma, you used me. You inflated my life, my money, my business, and handed that lie to this man so he could build a future on top of it. You stood in my house asking for more and more and more while knowing enough of the truth to keep pushing. Don't talk to me about rights. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't move me. Not then, because I had watched her weaponize softness before. I had watched her use grief, urgency, her mother's memory, all of it, whenever she needed the number in my account to become available. I was done mistaking desperation for innocence. Nathan stood now, voice harder. You're humiliating your daughter. No, I said. I'm refusing to finance you. He drew himself up, trying to recover whatever authority the room had taken from him. You don't know the full story. Then tell them, I said. Tell them about the debt. Tell them about the lenders. Tell them why a wedding needed to happen before your obligations caught up with you. Tell them why my daughter was presenting her father as a wealthy investor instead of what I really am, a contractor who worked for every damn dollar he has. He said nothing, because silence is confession when facts are already on the table. Emma looked from him to me and back again. That was the moment, the exact moment when her illusion split down the middle. Not because she suddenly understood everything, because she realized he wasn't going to save the story, and neither was I. One of Nathan's friends pushed back his chair. I'm out, he muttered, and left without looking at anyone. Another guest followed. Then another. Quietly at first, the way respectable people flee a fire they don't want to admit they smell. The room thinned. The fantasy went with it. Emma started crying in earnest now, mascara breaking, shoulders shaking. For a second she looked young again. Not manipulative. Not sharp. Just lost. And that almost reached me. Almost. Then she said the one thing that killed it. You ruined everything. Not asterisk is it true? Asterisk. Not asterisk how much did you know? Asterisk. Not asterisk how did this happen? Asterisk. Just that. Everything to her was still the event. The image. The collapse of the performance. Not the lie underneath it. I felt whatever softness remained in me go cold. No, I said quietly. I revealed it. Nathan grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. His composure was gone now, stripped away down to anger and fear. He looked at Emma, then at me, and I saw the calculation already restarting behind his eyes. Exit routes. Blame. Survival. Men like him never love. They attach. He left without another word. Just walked out. Didn't defend her. Didn't stay beside her. Didn't even pretend. And in that final ugly little act, he told her more truth than I had all night. Emma sank back into her chair like the strings holding her up had been cut. Around us, the remains of dinner sat untouched. Half-filled wineglasses, cooling plates, candles still burning over a celebration that had died before dessert. I gathered the papers calmly, folded them once, slid them back into my jacket. Then I looked at my daughter. Really looked. I saw my wife in her then, But not the version I had loved. The hidden version. The one that left trails and warnings and unfinished truths. I saw how deception survives in families. Not always as evil, sometimes as adaptation, vanity, fear. Sometimes as hunger wearing good clothes. I will pay for nothing, I told her. Not the wedding. Not his debts. Not a single lie built in my name. She stared at the table. Her voice, when it came, was small. What am I supposed to do now? It was the first honest thing she had asked in months. And maybe because of that, I answered her honestly. Now, I said. You find out who you are without someone else's money holding you up. Then I turned and walked out, leaving the skyline behind me, the restaurant behind me, the wreckage behind me. Outside, the night air was cold and clean. The city glittered on the water like nothing had happened. But something had. The illusion was dead. And for the first time since my wife's phone lit up in my hand, I felt the shape of her warning completely. She hadn't reached back to save me from grief. She had reached back to stop history from repeating itself through our daughter. The wedding was over. The lie was exposed. And now the real bill was finally coming due.